Greetings and salutations, and welcome to yet another edition of the Sunday Sermon with Reverend Riff. I am your host, Reverend Riff. Welcome on this, at least here where I'm at, absolutely beautiful morning. I hope it's beautiful where you are too. I hope you're having a great day. And indeed, Vale. Indeed. I hope you all are ready for this because buckle up, motherfuckers. This is where it gets wild. Yeah, Fear and Loathing on Patmos. That's as close as you can get to what is about to go down here. We're gonna talk about some stuff, and we're gonna have some fun with it. And so, just to set the scene from last week, we can't stop. This is the revelations of Christ catching. Oh, wait till we get a little further. You're going to see how apt that comparison is. So, last week, we started off talking about John. We figured out that he was on Patmos. We figured out we don't really know who this guy is or if his name is even actually John. And we know that he had been exiled to Patmos. And we know that while he was sitting in Patmos, he wrote this book. And that he claims that this book was a letter to the 7 churches throughout Turkey, that most of them were doing some good and some bad. Some were just doing some bad, some were just doing some good. But he felt the need to, hip them to what God had told him to tell them. So he wrote them this letter. That's the first part of the book. That's the first 3 chapters. And it's lovely stuff. Then all of a sudden, in chapter 4, this book takes a turn and gets wacky. And he details his apocalyptic vision of how the world will end, Christ's return, all that good stuff. That's what we are going to dive into today. So I hope you are ready. Because this is it. It's not going to get any crazier on this show than what we're going to talk about today. It's not even possible. So if this doesn't rustle your jimmies, I got nothing for you. So let's dive in, shall we? Let's get our handy dandy aid up. Boom. There we are. So yeah, this is the good part, I think, as most people consider in the book of Revelation. Nobody really cares about that letter to the churches or anything like that. It's an apocalyptic spectacular with all your favorite portents of doom. So first we need to talk about Montanus. Why do we need to talk about Montanus? Who the fuck is Montanus, you say? I can hear you. Let me clear that up. See, as we talked about last week, there's different kind of schools of thought of people of how they view. Yes, it's Mantar's dad. We've talked about there's different schools of thought on how you view the book of Revelation. There's the idealists who think that it's a metaphor. There's the historicists who believe that it talks about historical events in the life of the church. Then there's people who are preterists. They think that it was detailing the current events of, the time around 60 to 90 AD. And then there's other people who are futurists and believe that nothing in that book has happened yet. It's all coming. Well, up until around the 2nd, 3rd century, the church was decidedly on board with the preterist view because it just made sense. It just makes so much sense to believe that John of Patmos was talking about things that he had experienced in his life at that time. Well, along comes this guy named Montanus. And Montanus starts telling everybody all kinds of crazy stuff, and it creates a debacle for the church that begins to push the church to reinterpret the works of the John as something very far in the future. And while that seems more like a passing the buck kind of thing, it has created all of these end of the world doomsday maniacs. A lot of your evangelicals who are actually just itching for doomsday to come. A lot of that is because of the church's position shift thanks to our buddy Montanus here. Yeah, he appeared in Turkey around 156 CE, so 70, 80 years after John at Patmos wrote his stuff. and he developed a large following. I do mean almost overnight. Like, there's no record of this guy, and then all of a sudden, he's a big deal. And they have found archaeological evidence of cities that seem to have emptied out almost overnight. Like, people just were like, this dude, I'm buying what he's selling. So what was he selling? He claimed that the Holy Ghost had told him that Jesus was coming back. Like, right now, coming back. That the events of the Revelation were going to happen right now. And that Jerusalem was literally going to fall out of the sky and land in between Pepuza and Timon. That little star there is where he's talking about. So this guy went around and told people, hey, God's coming back. We're going to go wait for him out in the desert because the new Jerusalem is going to fall out of the sky and land there. And if we're there waiting, I don't know, I guess getting there first mattered. I don't know what he was going for there. But a whole bunch of people got on board with that. And they went out and hung out with this dude. Like, yeah, sounds like aliens to me too. So they went and hung out with this guy. And then he started committing like some S-tier level blasphemy. He started telling everyone that the Holy Spirit was still speaking to him and that was still prophesying through him, and that all of Jesus's teachings, that's not the end because he had more stuff to add. I mean, that's how big the set on Montanus was. This guy literally said, hold on, God's telling me there's a few updates and amendments to the Christian faith. Naturally, that went over about as well as you would think it did with most organized Christians at the time. Remember, the Christian church is absolutely in its infancy at this point, but it is starting to become organized. We've got a pope at this point, and these guys do not want to hear what he has to say. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, kind of like a ancient Joseph Smith. Hey, hold on, the Bible's not complete. I got some more shit to say. And yeah, eventually when Jerusalem didn't fall out of the sky, some people started to, leave Montanus's side. And Montanus eventually died, and the Montanastics, as they called them, they hung around for a while, about a century and a half. They still kept saying that, he had just gotten his dates wrong, but that it was going to land out here in the middle of the desert, and you should come live out here. He also literally hated fun. He preached that anything basically that is fun distracts you from God. And unfortunately, that's thought frame has seeped into some Christians today. But yeah, the church could not deal with Montanus saying, this is happening now, this is in the now. And it wasn't working well for them. And that is one of the things that helped push the church into the futurist kind of ideation.
Praise hail and praise Dale.
That, none of this has happened yet, and it's not going to happen for a really long time, because they were basically kicking the can down the street. They didn't want to deal with this. Again, as you also remember, we talked about last week, the book of Revelation was not a big deal. This is a relatively new phenomenon that people are so obsessed with this book and use it as one of the defining things of the Christian faith. That is a very new development. I think that's important to keep in mind. On a grand scale of history, it's pretty recent development. So, do you see that dazzling bastard there? Ladies and gentlemen, pimps, players, and hustlers, I'd like to introduce you to L. After this I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven, and the voice I had first heard speaking to me, like a trumpet, said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." And at once I was in the Spirit, and there before me was a throne in heaven with someone sitting on it. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby. So, he's red, probably not humanoid. And a rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne. Let's just drink that in because, yeah, by my count, that is the first true description of L we ever get. This ain't Jesus. This ain't a space dragon. This is glory incarnate. And it's pretty dope. So, we go on. Yeah. Remember we set the scene last week. We've got the 24 elders with their thrones sitting around El's throne there. He's got the 7 lamps lit in front of it, the 4 crazy creatures, and all the heavenly hosts and everybody. Yeah, it's pretty intense. What's going on? Why are there 24? I've had some people ask. That's a good question. There are 12 tribes of Israel, as everybody knows. Well, back in the early times when Moses was kind of, trying to organize the tribes, there was always 2 lead families from each tribe that were entrusted to be the priests for that tribe. Now, all priests for the main temple came from the Levi tribe, but each of their tribe had their own priests within that tribe. Those were always from very, 2 well-to-do families. So the implication here is, all of those elders are here with Christ in heaven. It looks like a Bee Gees album cover. And of course, you've got Elle back there being just magnificent, and the 4 creepy creatures hanging out in front. So this was kind of where we left off last week. We set this scene, and then we moved on. Now, if you noticed, those 4 creatures seemed very similar to the ones our buddy Zeke talked about with the cherubim, but there were some differences. As you can see, they're not exactly minor. It is amazing to me that people constantly say, "Oh, they're definitely the same animals," because the descriptions aren't the same here. Zeke's have 4 wings. John's have 6. It's fairly simple, but it's still a difference. Zeke's are covered in eyes. John's typical normal monster eye count there. However many eyes you'd expect to see on a monster, that's how many you got on him. Not like Zeke's, who, that was a defining feature. Zeke's had wheels. Remember the wheel in a wheel? One of the first things that gave people thoughts that maybe Zeke was talking about flying saucers? Yeah, John's don't have wheels. No wheels here. Wheelless. Zeke has a creature face, all 4 faces. Remember they had the 4 sided heads, and it was the ox, the man, the lion, and the eagle. And instead, for John, there are 4 different creatures. There is an ox, an eagle, a man, and a lion. Zeke's have man bods. John's have beast bods. I mean, it's that simple. John talks about them as having the body of beasts underneath the wings. Zeke goes out of his way to point out how they resemble men. And again, I'm not even trying to be a dick, but I feel like it's really kind of important to point out here. John on Patmos would have had access, more than likely, to Ezekiel's writings. He probably was able to read those writings. So maybe he got a bunk copy and he described them wrong as he remembered them, as he was, writing all this down. Maybe he took them and was like, I want to use his stuff, but I'm going to use it a little different. Maybe he misunderstood Ezekiel's translation and thought he did write the same monsters. Who knows? But again, it seems, I've always found it very interesting that there's these clear discrepancies between the 2 animals, 2 units that are described, and yet it is just taken for face value by just about every Christian I've ever met that these are the one and the same, that the Ezekiel's 4 beasts and John's are the same exact animals. I don't know why. If you want to go with it, but it seems a bit like a stretch to me. Then I saw a lamb, looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out to all the earth. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. I mean, it's pretty straightforward imagery there. The lamb is representing Jesus. He had been slain, his crucifixion, but he's not dead, and now he's a scary monster, apparently.
Praise hail and praise Dale.
The lamb is dead. And so now let's get into some real apocalypse shit. Because the lamb who had been slain, it's payback time. I watched as the lamb opened. No, oh wait, I guess I need to, explain, reset the scene. We had it set last week. As you remember, there was a book, and it had 7 seals on it, and no one could open it or even look at it, except for the guy who was describing it, because clearly he had to look at it to describe it. But don't let that confuse you. And so the lamb is able to open the seals, and the phrase "all hell is about to break loose" becomes quite literal. I watched as the lamb opened the first of the 7 seals, and then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." By the way, this is the most famous passage of the Bible for people who aren't really into the Bible. If you know the Bible on a secular level, this is probably the most famous patch to me. And he said, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. When the lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. When the lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages. Do not damage the oil and wine. Those are massively inflated prices, in case you didn't know. When the lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. Yeah. So, I mean, you see it here. This is the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It is about as famous as it gets. That's the passage. We've got conquest, the first one. He rides a white horse. We've got war. He rides a red horse, and he's got a sword. We've got pestilence and famine riding in behind them, and he's got the scales in his hand. And finally, we've got death with Hades following close behind him. It's as iconic of imagery that's ever been written. It is vivid, it's graphic, and I look at them and I see Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and Larry Zbyszko, but that's just me. You get the point. This is a big deal here. So basically, the Lamb has opened these seals, and the 4 horsemen hit the earth, and through conquest, war, famine, and just death, a quarter of the earth's population gonzo. No longer here. No, everybody's dead. Now, I think it's kind of important to talk about this. This is a big deal among Christians, is the timeline here. So let's take a second and really try to set this up. Okay, so everybody's heard of the rapture. I would say almost everybody's heard of the rapture. They've made a lot of movies about it. When I was a kid, we had to watch one called Thief in the Night, and it was ham-fisted, is certainly an explanation for it. But the idea was very simple, that at some point, Jesus is going to call all of his people back to heaven. When this happens in the timeline is a source of great consternation and divisiveness. There are pre-rapture or pre-tribulation rapturists, people who believe that before all this bad stuff happens, all the Christians are going to disappear. And that And that, all of a sudden the world will be like, where did everybody go? And that's when all the bad shit starts happening. There are mid-tribulation people, because we see the tribulation is a 7-year period, and the first 42 months, as we will learn today, first 3.5 years, it goes really well, and everything's really great. I mean, it's great on a social level. No one's worshiping God, and it's Bacal Canal, so, all that. But on a social level, everything's really great. And then at the halfway point is when the Antichrist pivots and starts being a real dick, and that's when things really go to shit for any Christians that are still here, or people that believe in God at that point, and that they will be sucked up then. And they're gone, and then the bad parts happen. And then there are people who believe that the Christians will be here throughout the entire tribulation, and that they will suffer alongside of the non-believers, and that their suffering will be a testament to the non-believers. There's no right or wrong here. It doesn't say. And there's a great source of confusion that I do want to clear up, though. In the book of Corinthians, Paul talks about at the final trumpet, the believers would be carried back. Well, in John's book, he writes about 7 trumpets that get blown, and a different wrathful thing happens with each trumpet. And on the 7th trumpet, everything just goes silent. And and when that happened, people immediately made the correlation. Oh, see, John said it was going to happen when he blew the trumpet, the last trumpet, and there's the last trumpet. So clearly that's what he meant. Little problem there. There's no way Saul or Paul had any idea what John of Patmos was writing. And John of Patmos almost assuredly never read Paul's letter to the Corinthians, so he couldn't have known that Paul said that. My take, and since you're here, I'm assuming you care, is that Paul was referring to the shofars being blown on Rosh Hashanah. Important thing about Paul that people do not get. Paul never converted. Paul believed that Jesus and his teachings were a modification of Judaism, and that Jesus was now allowing Gentiles to participate in the Jewish faith. But to Paul, he was not a Christian. He was still a Jew and observed the Jewish faith. He just thought you could integrate Christ's teachings into it, that it was a new covenant on his existing faith. That is important to keep in mind, because Paul would have celebrated Rosh Hashanah, and he would have celebrated the blowing of the shofar. So it's more likely that he was kind of using that symbolism, because Jews of the time would have associated the blowing of trumpets with a call to religious order. Much like in Muslim areas, they sound the horn and everybody has to go pray. This is a very similar feel. And so Paul understood that the imagery of blowing the trumpet would symbolize a time, a specific time for worship. And so all of God's children would be called up to him. He was not talking about the damn trumpet that our boy John of Patmos here is going to start talking about. He's not talking about the same trumpet. So there's no time frame given for the rapture. Anybody that tells you that they can prove this is where the rapture happens is pulling your leg, because they're probably using some smoke and mirrors. Just don't, okay? Don't. We don't know. Nobody knows. If they say they know, they're full of shit. So, we've got our 4 horsemen. We're apocalypsing it up. And now, we've got those were the first 4 seals. Remember, it's a 7 seals. The number 7 is going to repeatedly come up here. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they maintained. He's talking about martyrs. They called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" Can we talk for a minute? Everybody's curious about, what was he talking about? Is he talking about the future? No, he's clearly, this book is very clearly metaphorical, and he's very clearly writing this to the Christians who are undergoing some persecution right now. This is a metaphor to help them feel like, hey, stick with it. We're going to get them back in the end. I just had to interject that there, because to me, it's as clear as the nose on my face. Yet everybody assigns more to this book than there is, and they don't read between the lines. We'll keep doing that. Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little bit longer until the full number of their fellow servants, their brothers and sisters, were killed just as they had been. Yes, that's right. God says, hold on, enough of you haven't been murdered yet for me to avenge you. It's right there. I didn't write it. I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair, and the whole moon turned blood red, and the stars fell in the sky to earth as figs drop from a tree when shaken by a strong wind. The heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. That is some shit. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in caves and among the rocks from the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it? So, yeah. He opens those seals, and an earthquake that, according to our description here, levels mountains, moves islands, and everyone runs and hides in caves and goes, oh shit, God's back, and he's pissed. So, now, we get some trumpets. Little trumpet section. Heaven's trumpet line is like ska. It kills things. Because these trumpets, I want you to take note. Remember when we did the 10 plagues of Egypt? Yeah, these are about the same. So, kind of recycling here. God's bringing his plagues back, you know. So, we got a trumpet. Boom. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down upon the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. That is not a good start. So now there's no greenery anywhere on the earth. Well, a third of it is gone. Second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. Meteorite, sounds like. A third of the sea turned into blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. That's my favorite part. That, like, somehow the ships sank. I don't know. I'm assuming water turning into blood would change buoyancy requirements, and yeah, ships just start going down. Then the third member of our ska band sounds his wretched trumpet, and a third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. Anybody who knows what wormwood is what you use to make absinthe. It has an incredibly bitter taste. Incredibly bitter. So basically, a third of the fresh water on Earth is now undrinkable. Things are going swell. And see, these are the trumpets that Christians apparently are going to be here for. If you're believing that seventh trumpet shit, you're here for all this. Doesn't really sound great. I would prefer to not be here for any of this. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. Again, we love the number 3 here, we really do, but this one is kind of, how does a third of the sun go dark? Does the sun get 1/3 as bright?
Praise Hail, praise
I
Dale.
don't know. Was he talking about an eclipse? I don't know, but something's going on. And as I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the trumpet blasts about to be sounded by the other three angels." That's right, motherfuckers. Are you ready for that? All of that shit just happened. And now it's the bad part, according to the flying eagle that talks. Now it's the bad part. We have a third of all the greenery on Earth burned up. We have a third of the oceans turned to blood. We have a third of the fresh water on the planet ruined. And a third of the stars have gone dark in the sky. But now's when the bad part starts. Drink that in for the insanity that it is for just a moment, please. I don't know what El is doing up there, if he thought this was like the light part of his torment, but fuck. So the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. I want to point out here that in this instance, the word that he used is not the same word that we traditionally think of with star. He's not talking about a star in the sky here specifically. He is talking about an angel. So that star had fallen from the sky to earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. And when he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like smoke from a gigantic furnace. This fucking imagery is dope. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. And out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. And they were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree that are left, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. If you weren't marked by God as one of his people, bad stuff. This would imply that the Christians are still here, right? That the rapture couldn't have happened yet. Not so. Many people believe that the rapture would happen at the beginning, and that the people who were still here would turn to God because of all the shit that's going on. They'd be like, holy crap, God is real, because look what he's doing. I can see him up there in heaven. Those are the people it could be referring to here, or it could be referring to the regular Christians that were Christians before all this shit started. Depends on how you want to pick it. They were not allowed to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. During those days, people will seek death but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. Hold on, I apologize. 1 second, guys. Let me, whoop. Oh, no. There we go. Sorry about that. Where are we at? And their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair. Their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions. And in their tails they had the power to torment people for 5 months. They had as them king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek is Apollyon. That is destroyer. That is like...
It's a big dog and it's taking a fat dump.
I mean, that's insane. So, I will say, when God says this is when he gets bad, he really ratchets up the bad. As, we're talking locusts emerge from the abyss and start messing people up. Now, this is where we get into some of the fun of, did he really mean locusts, or did he see something he couldn't describe any other way, and so he used imagery? This is probably the favorite pastime of evangelicals who study this book, is they try to take these descriptions and figure out what is it that he was talking about. So maybe he saw that. It's entirely possible that that is what dude saw. Looks terrifying. I don't want any part of it. Or maybe dude saw that. Because if it's 95 CE and you saw that, you'd have no clue what you were looking at. But there's enough similarities that, yeah, maybe he was talking about attack helicopters spraying chemical weapons on people. Maybe he's talking about guys with jetpacks that could fly around and, shoot people with stinging darts or something. Or maybe he saw a giant fucking scary locust with people faces. I don't know. But that is a one way to interpret it. If you want to interpret it that he was seeing modern times, that's what you go with. You can kind of see some of it there. You really can. So, enjoy. The sixth angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the four horns of the golden altar that is before God. And it said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, "Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." And the four angels who had been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind. The number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. That's a lot of people. I heard their number. The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the three plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur. Really? A third of mankind was killed by the plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths. And the power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflict injury. The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshipping demons and idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood, idols that cannot see or hear or walk, nor did they repent of their murders, their magic arts, their sexual immorality, or their thefts. Yep, 200 million. You got it. And, so, again, what is he bitching about here? What is he all worked up about here? The same thing that Christians have always been worked up about. That people are not worshiping their religion, they're worshiping other religions. That's his big beef. Then it's also they're murdering magical arts, sexual immorality, and theft. Notice that the big complaint is that they're worshiping other gods because John is a peach. Again, it's very easy to understand what is going on here. He's calling out everybody who doesn't believe with his believers. He's making it sound like if you stop believing, shit's going to get really bad. Why this is viewed so differently than any other book in the Bible, I don't get, because it's the same story. But wait, what does this story have? That's right, motherfuckers, it has laser lions. Laser lions. Laser lions. I'm not gonna tell you what he could have possibly been seeing, because I don't want to believe for a second that we're getting anything but laser lions. Laser Lion better be a power metal band. If it's not, we're starting it tomorrow. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven. He was robed in a cloud with a rainbow above his head. His face was like the sun, and his legs were like fiery pillars. I mean, can this guy set a stage or what? He was holding a little scroll, which lay open in his hand. He planted his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land, and he gave a loud shout like the roar of a lion. When he shouted, the voices of the seven thunders spoke. And when the seven thunders spoke, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven say, "Seal up what the seven thunders have said, and do not write it down." Really? Like, I mean, again, that as a writing technique is tremendous. And you want to talk about a way to increase your own authority on a matter? Oh, yeah, there was this super important thing that God said, but he told me I'm not allowed to write it down. Again, to go to Kurt's earlier analogy, much like Joseph Smith was the only person that could read or see the magical gold plates that God supposedly gave him, and he was the only one that could understand them and translate them. Yeah, look at this guy. He's the only one that knows what the seven thunders say. Who are the seven thunders? I have no fucking idea. Let's look at the beginning of that for a minute, though. The little scroll is really important here. Okay? Why is the little scroll important? We'll get to that. Then the voice I had heard from heaven spoke to me once more. Go, take the scroll that lies open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land. So I went to the angel, and I asked him to give me the little scroll. He said to me, take it and eat it. It will turn your stomach sour, but in your mouth it will be as sweet as honey. I took the little scroll from the angel's hand and ate it. It tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. But when I had eaten it, my stomach turned sour. Then I was told, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. What could the little scroll be? What could the little scroll be? Well, I'm going to tell you. And people aren't going to like this. Prepare to jack your spice meter up to 11. The Isle of Patmos is not really a place you would want to have been marooned. Not a lot of great native flora and fauna to eat. Wasn't developed. You basically got sent there because you were going to die. Well, there was something that grew on Patmos and still grows there today, and we know that it grew there pretty much for all of history. It's on your screen right now. That, ladies and gentlemen, is morning glory. Morning glory is edible, the seeds especially. If you were to eat them, they would have kind of a sweet flavor from nuts. They will make your stomach hurt, you will shit yourself, and then you will trip your balls off. They contain LSA, which is very chemically similar to LSD and has very similar effects. So maybe that little scroll that he ate, maybe that was some little morning glory seeds, and maybe this whole thing is an LSD basic, an LSD analog induced fever dream. I'm just throwing it out there because, he's pretty descriptive. I ate this. It was sweet. My stomach started to hurt. Batshit crazy things happened. I'm just putting it out there that there is a fairly credible source for why my man saw laser lions. Also, our buddy Zeke had a similar experience. And he said to me, Son of man, eat what is before you. Eat this scroll. Then go and speak to the people of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. Then he said to me, Son of man, eat this scroll I'm giving you, and fill your stomach with it. So I ate it, and it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. Then the Spirit of the Lord lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness and anger of my spirit with the strong hand of the Lord on me. And I came to the exiles who lived at Tel Aviv near the Kebar River, and there, where they were living, I sat among them for 7 days, deeply distressed. Man, it almost sounds like when Ezekiel wrote his apocalyptic vision of the end of Israel, that he ate something sweet. And then there was some bitterness. And apparently it took him a week to recover. And he was lifted away by the Spirit of the Lord. Or he was tripping his balls off. There's all kinds of psychedelics that grow naturally in the Middle East. So again, just throwing it out there. Maybe we should not get so caught up on the apocalyptic writings of some guys who are completely drugged out of their minds, and maybe we should focus on the other parts of the book, I don't know, about like loving each other and being good people, instead of worried about the fever dream of some fucking dope heads at a Grateful Dead concert. Moving on. Now, we get to the two witnesses. This part, hold on, I feel like I need a little more clarification. This sermon's going to run long too. I'm sorry about that, but there's just a lot of bullshit to get through here. So, now we're at the point, two witnesses are going to appear. The identity of these two witnesses is another amazing bit of, conjecture that Christians, again, love to argue about. I must say that the most common explanation, to me, at least, if you want to say that it works in the rules of their universe, it's stated numerous times in the Bible that it is appointed unto man once to die, and after that the judgment. Well, in the Bible, there are two specific mentions of guys who never died. Our boy Enoch and Elijah. Neither one of them ever died. And so it would kind of make God a liar if he said everybody has to die. Because he didn't say everybody has to die except for these two guys. So it would make sense then that they are the two witnesses that come back here. Now, we don't know if that's even what John intended, but as, analysis of this text, I think that is the most plausible thing too. Whether John intended that or he just had two witnesses and people have, made the pieces to the puzzle fix because we've lined them up ourselves, I can't tell you. But that's who I think it is. It makes it more fun, right? Callback characters. Everybody likes callback characters. So, and I will appoint my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. That's about 36. That's about 42 months. That is, 3.5 years. This is about the amount, that first period of the tribulation. That's what's going on here. They are the two olive trees and the two lampstands, and they stand before the Lord of the earth. And if anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. They have power to shut up the heavens so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying. No rain delays. And they have the power to turn the waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. These guys are OP. And now, when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them. Their bodies will lie in the public square of the great city, which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, some from every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. The inhabitants of the earth will gloat over them and will celebrate by sending each other gifts because the two prophets who had tormented those who live on the earth. But after 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and terror struck those who saw them. And they heard a loud voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up here. And they went up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies looked on. That's insane. A lot to digest there, but let's do it. So these two witnesses, we're going to say Elijah and Enoch, they come down, and they start telling people, you better repent. You better worship the real one true God. He's pissed. Have you not seen everything that he's done? He is irritated. And when people will try to stop them, they apparently will do all kinds of amazing wizard shit to these people until eventually, when their time is up, the beast from the abyss will kill them. Now, I've always found it interesting, the little line there about everyone will watch them for 3.5 days. That wouldn't have been possible until very recently. But now, with the internet, global live streaming, like you people sitting here watching me, they could absolutely put a live camera feed on the two bodies and show those two bodies on the air for 3.5 days straight, making sure everybody knows, hey, look, these guys are dead. No need to worry. And everybody's celebrating, everybody's partying while they're watching their These Guys Are Dead live stream. And then all of a sudden, on the These Guys Are Dead live stream, the name, they have to update the stream name because they're not dead anymore. These dudes get up and fly away in a cloud. And people are now really, really freaked out. Ugh. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. Again, it's talking about the fallen angels. The devil took a third of the angels. That's what it's talking about here. It's not raining stars. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child from the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might take care of for 1,260 days. There's that 3.5 years thing again. The war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. That's what he just described, and drink that in, because it's amazing. But there's, again, some people have looked at this in many different ways. One of the ones that I like the most is that if you're envisioning that woman, that's Mary. She's got the crown of the 12 stars. That means she's going to give birth to the leader of Israel, the leader of the 12 tribes. The baby that they're talking about is Jesus. Well, who is the dragon? If you remember from a story we did when we did the Jesus episode, Herod tried to kill Jesus when he was first born, and Jesus' family had to run and hide in Egypt for about 3 years until Herod died. So many people think that this is just kind of mythologizing that, and that the dragon head that was trying to devour the baby when it was born was Herod. Another way to interpret this that is very popular is that the woman is the church. The woman is Christianity, and she's giving birth to the church, and that the 7-headed dragon is actually Rome, and that Rome was attempting to destroy the church. Why would you say the dragon is Rome? Have you ever heard of Rome referred to as the city on 7 hills? Oh, look at that. We got 7 heads. I mean, and maybe he'll just flat out tell us that, and people will ignore it for the next 3,000 years. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. This beast is also fucking rad. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but it had feet like those of a bear, with a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and authority, and one of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound. But the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshipped the dragon because he had been given authority to the beast, and they had also worshipped against the beast. Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. And it opened its mouth to blaspheme God, and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All the inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all those names who have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain for the creation of the world. Lord Stanley might very well be the beast. So yeah, that's what we've got going on now. We've got the 7-headed dragon with the horn. We've got the leopard monster that comes out of the ocean, known as the beast from the sea. And we've got the false prophet beast that is blaspheming and deceiving everybody. Pandemonium going on here. Absolutely insane. The number of the beast. And yes, we're not talking about the song. 6 is the number of man, being just short of perfection, which is God, and is represented by the number 7. Because this is the section of the Bible where we get 666 that everybody knows. 666 mocks the Trinity as its man's number 3 times. If you've ever heard of gematria, it is basically when you use numerical ciphers to assign numerical values to name. There is a very common cipher that you can use, and when you do that with 666, it spells out Nero Caesar. I am about as sure as I am sitting here that that is who John was referring to, and that all of this whole book, is him mythologizing Nero's persecution of the Christians. It just makes a lot of sense. Stop turning this into the end of the world, please. Idealists see 666 as a reference to the imperfection of man and the beast and the changing views of society on religion. Also, not a terrible way to understand why they reference 666. Historicists use a different cipher with gematria to show that 666 spells out Vicarius Filii Dei, which, of course, is one of the Pope's titles. Vicarius Filii Dei, I guess, I forget, it's the vicar of something. But, yeah. Futurists, they don't like math or fancy learning and just accuse whoever they are mad at that moment of being in league with the beast. So, yeah, people that, want to spout off about how this is coming next week or next month and we better get ready, don't listen to them. They aren't very good at math and no one needs them anyway. Now, the 7 bowls of wrath are about to be poured out. At this point, the Lamb is up on top of a mountaintop and he says, "Bring me the 7 bowls of my wrath," to pour her out. That's right, everything that's happened apparently was not punishment enough. You got it in an email that Biden was the beast? Well, I guess I can shut this down. We've solved the mystery. But yeah, everything that's happened, somehow we didn't start the punishment yet. I guess everything else was foreplay. That's terrifying. The first bowl, sores on anyone who has the mark of the beast. Yes, you remember that one from our Egyptian plague as well. The second bowl, the sea. I guess I should have. I'm sorry, I skipped over something. My apologies. So we all know that 666 is the number of the beast, and in the book it says that no one will be able to basically engage in any form of commerce, buy, sell, work, whatever, unless they get the mark of the beast on their body, be it on their forehead or on their wrist. So that's who he's referring to now. The third bowl, all the rivers and springs turn to blood. Remember, already a third of them were. Now we're at all. So now all of the ocean is blood and all the rivers are blood. Everything's blood. Fourth bowl causes to shine so brightly that everyone gets scorched. They need SPF 1000 because shit gets crazy. Then on the fifth bowl, the earth is plunged into darkness. Again, it's like, God's remixing his earlier plagues. Really, he's in a dry spell for creative plagues. The sixth one, the Euphrates River dries up and the dragon vomits out 3 demons. Shut up. Alright, you're done. Then, the biggest earthquake ever levels all the cities and all the mountains, and giant hailstones over 100 pounds fall from the sky. So it's hailing boulders. All the cities, all the mountains, everything has been destroyed. It's not good. Things are bad. And one of the 7 angels, who had the 7 bowls, came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon, the great mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth." Babylon was often used as a reference to Rome because obviously if you were writing that Rome was a big whore, the Romans would kill you. So again, this is not a really thick metaphor, but people try to make it one. I've heard that, some people believe that that's the Pope, and that when they're talking about all her adornments, that's what they're referring, is that all the vestal garments that the Pope wears, and that the church was the blasphemer because all the kings of the earth worked together with the church. I don't know, man. That seems like a real stretch to me. Instead of the more obvious thing that he was talking about the Roman Empire, and that, the emperors and their excess, and the fact that the emperors made themselves to be gods, which would be blasphemous. I don't know. I'm just going to go with it. This calls for a mind with wisdom. I can't stress this enough. Right here, he's going to explain everything. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. He freaking explains the metaphor. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain only for a little while. Remember when we talked about the, different emperors, and how there was that string of emperors that didn't last real long, and, several died? The beast, who he was, and now is not, is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. Another very common belief, when you're talking about the wound, they talked about the one head that was wounded and the wounded healed. There was a genuine belief among Christians at the time. When Nero committed suicide, he was only 30 years old. There were people who, in the Christian community, believed that Nero either faked his death to get away from people that, were not happy with his rule, and that he would come back one day. And there were other people that literally thought Nero might come back from the dead, that the devil would somehow bring Nero back to life because Nero was the Antichrist to these people. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received the kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose, and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire, for God has put it in their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over the beast their royal authority, until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. I mean, he's spelling it out right there, that the whore of Babylon is Rome. It's really, really simple. It's right there. I don't know why that's so hard for people, because he really spelled it out. So, whoops, wrong button. Yep. So the whore of Babylon appears. That's Rome, guys. It just is. It's Rome. And he was... Some people, if you'd like to go down Conspiracy Theory Boulevard for a minute, I'll be happy to drive you. So I remember when the European Union was formed, because I am old. I remember not when it was formed, but when it was starting to actually gain prominence. As a very young child, I remember hearing the religious leaders that my family were all friends with being gathered and talking about that this was clearly the beginning of the end. And that the European Union was the beast with 7 heads. Because when it was initially founded, there were 5 members. And then in 1973, 2 more members, Ireland and Denmark, joined. And in that happening, there were now 7 members. And everyone was convinced in many religious circles that this was the signal, that now there were the 7 kings of Europe, and that they would consolidate their power together and give it to the beast. And so whoever became head of the European Union would clearly be the Antichrist. Now there's 27 members, and their math doesn't work anymore. And I haven't really heard them keep harping on that. But that is what you will get with these people. They will continually take this book and try to manipulate real world events to be what the book says is supposed to happen, so that they can feel like they are, it's the same thing people, they do it with Nostradamus. I'm not just harping on Christians here. People do it with Nostradamus, where they take Nostradamus's predictions and they bend reality to fit into them so they can say, see, clearly he was right about his prophecy. People are doing the same shit here. What John of Patmos was talking about was he was basically writing some fanfic to uplift the believers and to tell them, I know things aren't great right now, but stick with it and it'll get better. He was not telling us how the world is actually going to end. It's a metaphor. So after the Whore of Babylon appears and that whole thing, God locks Satan in the basement, so to speak. Satan and them they're locked into the abyss, and there is a 1,000-year reign for Christians on earth, and everything's great. And then God opens up the lock one more time, and Satan gathers an army, as numerous as the grains of sand, we're told. And Jesus, riding on a white horse at the front, leads the Christians in battle against them. The Christians trounce them and triumph. Satan and his minions are thrown into the pits of hell to burn for eternity. And the earth is consumed in fire. And a new earth is born, a new heaven and a new earth. And everyone lives forever there with Jesus in happiness. And they're there with God, and it's just great. That's the end of the tale. Again, it's the happy ending that only Hollywood could provide. After all that, everything ends good for the Christians, and all the bad people are punished, just like everybody really secretly wants. It's a fun read. It's super interesting, but it was a historical story. It was a story about what those people were living in at the time, and it was designed to give them hope. It is not supposed to be something that should supersede all the rest of the messages in the Bible. It is not something that you should be focused on. This book should be read for pleasure. It should be read because it's interesting, because it has cool imagery, it has lots of crazy monsters and chaos, and it can be very fun. Don't read this book and try to figure out when the end of the world is going to be and all that shit. Just don't. And as we read all that, I don't know if you guys noticed a character who was missing that everybody seems to think is in this book. It'd be a little dude named the Antichrist. He's not really mentioned in the book. Antichrist is mentioned several times in the Bible. Not in Revelation here. And when Antichrist is mentioned, it's usually plural. People leave that out. It is Antichrists. Basically, anybody who is railing against God's religion is an Antichrist in these people's view. And a specific Antichrist in the book of Revelation is really more of a work of fan fiction and kind of cobbling things together. Like, the guy who's the false prophet who does his work for the beast, yeah, that's the Antichrist here, but like John isn't calling him the Antichrist. He's not like the guy. He's not any more special than anybody. He's a tool. So, again, stop worrying about who's the Antichrist, except for it's probably Donald Trump. Because one of the things that some of the imagery posts to is that, the head that was wounded and came back, some people like to believe that's the Antichrist. It's never spelled out that it is, but I'm going to go out and say it. Fine. Donald Trump losing and winning the presidency, then losing in 2020, that was like, the wound on the head. So if he comes back and wins in 2024, we're fucked, y'all. Phone it in. It's done. That's what I'm saying. I'm sticking to that one because, fuck it, that's what we do here, right? We make predictions and we stick with them. So if Donald Trump wins in 2024, be afraid. Be very afraid. just because he's a horrible human being and the sycophants that follow him are also horrible human beings. Not because any of this stuff is going to happen. This is fiction. This is nonsense. So there it is. Wrapped it up in a little bow for you. Have fun with it. Don't take this too seriously. Please. Don't take this too seriously. It's a lot of fun. And you can, if you go back, read about the early church. Read about the persecution they suffered. Read about what went down at the time John wrote this. It was, again, most of the persecution was far more political in nature. But hey, it's really easy to sell, yourself if you are put upon. Because as has been stated by the chat and by me, Christians love a good persecution story. They always have. Since day one, it has been their thing. The whole Bible is a persecution story. That's kind of been the whole thing. So maybe worry less about persecution and just try and be a good person. Be a decent person. Stop worrying about whether people believe this or whatever, or worrying about who the Antichrist is, or what the beasts represent, or whether the locusts are real locusts, or if they're fucking helicopters. No one fucking cares. None of that is important. Stop missing the forest for the fucking trees. I'm so sick of this goddamn book, and we are never going to talk about it on the show again, because this book is a result of a whole lot of bullshit. This book is why evangelical Christians treat people like shit. They believe that there's no point in caring about people in this world because you just need to worry about them in the next. Fuck that. Okay? Be good to people here on this plane. Treat people with respect, regardless of what they believe. Within reason. If they're Nazis, you don't have to treat them with respect. But I'm just... the more I read this and prepared for this, it really bugged me because I realized how many people don't know shit about the other 65 books in the Bible, but they pour their time and effort into this book. And it's super interesting. It's fun to read. But they pour their time into it, again, for kind of the same reason that John wrote it. They feel put upon. They feel persecuted. And this book is, this bloody, blood-drenched fan fiction that they're going to win at the end. And everybody who got in their way is going to get what's coming to them. That is like the antithesis of Christ's message, okay? That is like the exact opposite. Jesus was all about turning your enemies into friends. And if they wanted to stay your enemies, then you still loved them anyway. That was his message. This is self-serving fan fiction by an angry guy on an island who ate a bunch of hallucinogens. Calm down. Stop focusing on this. Stop fixating on this. Stop worrying about the end of the fucking world. How about we try and prevent it? Let's solve global warming. Let's solve this fucking pandemic. Let's not worry about the end of the world. Let's not embrace it. Let's not run towards it. Why? It's not... No. You've missed the point. If that's where you're at, you've missed the point. God is love. Jesus commanded. The first commandment was to love God. And the second one was to love everybody else as much as you love God. Only two commandments that matter. Just do that. And leave the fan fiction and stuff to J.J. Abrams. Please. Stop. Just stop. Stop reading this book. Stop interpreting this book as the future and as a roadmap for how the end of the world is coming. A guy that ate some hallucinogens 2,000 years ago does not have his finger to the pulse of the biorhythm of life. I hope you all enjoyed this. I'm sorry for getting on my soapbox here at the end, but I really felt I needed to say what I said. So thanks for being here. We're going to take some time off. I don't know how long. We will be back, though. And when Season 3 comes back, it's going to be different, but in a good way. And I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it. But so long for now. Thank you for everything, all your kind words, all your encouragement, for coming here every week, for watching. I genuinely, it means the world to me. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me talk. And remember, love your neighbor as yourself. Thank you.